Eric ONeil, tell us, at that point, I think I just promoted you, but at that point you weren't really an agent. Tell us how you got into the FBI and what got you to that point where your character has that confrontation or that meeting with your superior.
Right, well, I was a operative in the FBI. I was a investigative specialist for the Special Surveillance Group. So what I did was street-level undercover work and surveillance field work in counterterrorism and counterintelligence. And I got picked to work the Hanssen case, which was a little different. Instead of being behind a camera lens, I was face-to-face with my target. That scene is the big reveal in the movie. And it's where my handler, or the agent who was in charge of me, Kate, is telling me that this guy is a terrible, terrible spy, and not just the subject of investigation, but actually he's our target now.
How much damage did Robert Hanssen do to the FBI and its intelligence gathering mechanism?
Well, the exact extent of the damage done is classified. We don't know exactly, but it's in the billions. He tore apart our counterintelligence program. He had been tearing it apart from the inside for his entire career. And so right now, the FBI is still in the process of rebuilding and fixing problems with sources and many different things that he did.
Why did Hanssen sell these secrets to the Russians?
Well, the why is the big question. And we don't really know. Only Hanssen knows, and he's not talking. He's in solitary confinement right now and not talking to anyone. I have an opinion. I can give you that. I think he sold out early in his career to make money. He sold out just to make the cash, to put himself in the place in life that he felt his ego demanded. And then it became sexy for him. It became the thing that made him important and what he put his personality into. And he just didn't want to stop. And he kept going with the spying for 22 years.
How long were you involved in the actual investigation, and how close did you get to him? What kind of things did he tell you?
Gotcha. My investigation was just under 2 months. I came in at the tail end. At the time I was assigned, we thought it would be 1 to 2 years. It turned out that this guy was about to make a drop, little did we know, and we were fortunate in finding that out pretty quickly. I was assigned primarily to communicate with him and watch him, to try and extract information from him that would lead us to knowing where he'd make that drop. So if there's any success, that was it. And we did create a mentor-mentee relationship, which was the most effective way of getting to him to communicate. And he told me any number of things. He would speak constantly about computers, of course. We were the information assurance section. His religion was incredibly important to him, and his family. These were 3 big topics.
In the movie, they explain that they've got information on Hanssen. They've got a lot of evidence regarding his activities, but that they wanted to catch him in the act of making a drop. Why was that so important to breaking this case?
A couple of reasons. The information that we had, that the FBI had obtained from the Russian source, the partial fingerprint and the partial voice print, probably wouldn't have cut it as far as really putting the screws to him in a prosecution. They were circumstantial. In order to use them, you would have to burn your source, put your source up. The other side of that is you want to catch him red-handed. You want to be able to exert the most pressure you can, not because you're looking to punish, but because you're seeking to exert pressure to get him to talk. It was incredibly important to understand what Hanssen had done so that we could fix it.
Eric ONeil, former FBI agent and key figure in the Robert Hanssen spy case, is our guest. Our first call comes from Mobile, Alabama, on our line for Republicans. Good morning.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, you can. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. I'd like to comment on how much this spying has hurt America. And from what I understand and been watching, it's been a lot of Jewish spies that have hurt America, yet they pretend to be our best friend. Can you comment on that?
Well, I don't know that spies are typically Jewish. I can think of the last number of spies we had were Robert Hanssen, Aldrich Ames, Earl Pitts, Nicholson, and none of them were Jewish. So I can't agree with you there, but I can say that spying certainly does hurt America, and spying historically has hurt any country it's been employed against. It's a very, very effective tool of warfare.
Robert Hanssen was a Roman Catholic.
Yes, he was.
And my understanding is that you were picked in part because you were also Catholic.
That's probably true.
How did that play in your relationship?
Well, it was a huge in to Robert Hanssen. I think the first time he actually began to open up to me and speak to me as an individual rather than just a subordinate, after we went to church together. We went to the Catholic Information Center, which is it's still there. It's on K Street here in D.C. And there's a church in the back, little did I know. I thought it was a bookstore. And he opens the doors, and we're in a church. And he's like, we're going to church. I thought to myself, wow, this is the first time in this investigation I feel completely confident. I grew up. I grew up as a Catholic. My parents are both Catholic. I went to Gonzaga, which is a preparatory school, and did prep with the Jesuits, that's true, here in D.C. And felt very confident in the rite of Mass. And I could tell he was watching me. You know, and I think that after that he realized this guy really is Catholic. You know, it's quite possible he's not a plant, that this is a real job, and this is my real subordinate.
And Opus Dei played a big part in his personality. Tell us about that.
Well, it was incredibly important to him. Opus Dei was the center of his religion, and he believed that if you were Catholic and not Opus Dei, you were more on the junior varsity. So he had begun a process to mentor or sponsor me into Opus Dei, which I resisted. I felt and I feel very confident in my faith, and I didn't really like the fact that he was trying to push me somewhere else.
Did his religion, did his relationship with Opus Dei, do you think it gave him some sort of an excuse or gave him an absolution with regard to his spying activities?
I actually see it the other way. I think that his religion, which I believe he believed very, very ardently in, was a difficult point for him. He knew what he was doing was wrong. I don't go for the craziness. I don't go for the demons that pushed him, or the poor relationship he had with his father. The many different reasons that people suggest he did this. I think that he believed in his faith. He didn't live his faith, and he knew that what he was doing was wrong. And I think it caused him great distress. Next call for Eric ONeil comes from Seagrove Beach, Florida. Good morning.
Good morning. I've got a question for Mr. ONeil and a comment. I've been following the Hanssen case, I guess, since I ever heard about it, and he hasn't mentioned that one of the reasons it took the FBI so long to catch up to him was that they were pursuing the wrong person for a considerable number of years. My understanding is that they pursued a CIA agent and harassed his family, as I understand it, and as I understand it, have still not anybody apologized to this man. Does he know anything about that?
Well, yes, the FBI, when it's known that there's a penetration somewhere in our intelligence community, looks everywhere. The CIA, the FBI. The problem with the FBI side is that Hanssen was one of the superiors in the counterintelligence program. So he was hiding himself, and he was also feeding misinformation that was pointing our investigations out to the CIA. So, you know, Hanssen was making sure that any searching for the mole in the FBI was deflected over to the CIA. So he was incredibly smart in how he protected himself.
Next up is Long Island, New York. On our line for Republicans, you're on with Eric ONeil.
Hi, I just saw the movie this weekend.
Great.
And I have some questions regarding the depiction of Mr. Hanssen's Catholicism in the movie. So I have three questions. One, did he actually have a crucifix on the wall in his office? Because I'm under the impression that overt displays of religion in a public building are illegal. Second, did he ask you repeatedly to say the rosary and become, you know, more spiritual in order to do your job in a better way? And third, did he actually come to your apartment to hypnotize your wife while you weren't there?
In order, which I've written down so I don't forget them. Crucifix on the wall in his office. He was very religious. He had a crucifix on his wall. He had an icon of his desk, and every day at 4 o'clock he got down on his knees and he prayed the novena, a prayer to Mary. Saying the rosary, he did, in fact, pray with him frequently in his office. He asked if I would say the novena with him every day at 4 o'clock, which I resisted. I, once again, didn't like that. Although I am Roman Catholic and practicing, I didn't like that he was pushing his faith on me, and that he felt that mine wasn't adequate. And lastly, Hanssen never came to my apartment. Thank God. I don't know if Juliana, the real Juliana, would have been as calm as the Caroline DeVerna playing Juliana in the movie if that had happened.
Sun Valley, California, on our line for Independence. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob, and hallelujah on this glorious morning, all this talk of Catholicism. Anyhow, looking good as always, Rob. You're one of my favorite journal hosts.
Thank you very much.
Mr. ONeil, good to talk to you. You look like an altar boy. Anyway,
Thank you, I was.
Me too. Anyway, I'm just very curious. Why is it, Agent ONeil, that just it seems law enforcement agencies in general, and especially, way up at the federal level, are just so rife with corruption? What is it about law enforcement, you think, that makes it such a, a criminal, more often than not, a criminal's game, as opposed to an agent like yourself, who seems to be like somebody who comes at it from a pure, honest, more or less heroic point of view, as opposed to somebody who's just trying to, and I think you said the operative word, somebody who's trying to make big money off of their power status as a law enforcement agent. What is...
Okay.
Well, Sun Valley, thanks for your call.
Well, just to make a quick correction, I never was an FBI agent. I had left the FBI before I made agent, and now work in private practice as a lawyer. Your question is, why is there so much corruption, or at least does it appear that there's so much corruption in federal and state, I guess you said law enforcement practices? I don't think there's any more corruption there than there is anywhere else. I think you're going to find the same level or more in any corporation or company in any country. I think that it's very visible when someone goes bad in these areas where we are giving people the power to protect us. And when you find someone that is corrupt there, it certainly resonates a lot stronger across the country. I think that in the FBI, especially, when you have people who are protecting us, it feels very untoward when someone becomes a Robert Hanssen.
So that we're all clear on this, you said that you were an operative. Is that like a probationary kind of a thing? Or explain to us how you go from operative to agent to...
Right. It causes a little bit of confusion. I was a investigative specialist was my title, and I worked for a group called the Special Surveillance Group. It's a splinter group in the FBI, and the idea being that the FBI created a group that was incredibly proficient in surveillance, best in the world. You send them out on the street and do undercover work, and they're ghosts. No one ever sees them unless they want to be seen. It is not an agent, and you would have to go back to Quantico. Again, an SSG operative graduates from Quantico to agent's class, where you would learn other things, such as a lot of the legal things, the arrest power, the firearms, which SSG doesn't focus on. I left before I had made a decision to go back to agent's class.
Our next call comes from Elgin, Illinois, on our line for Republicans. You're on with Eric ONeil. Good morning.
Hi, Mr. ONeil. I had a question. How long did it take to get this guy? I mean, weren't there red flags? You know, being a member of Opus Dei, I mean, I thought that's kind of a bizarre thing on myself. I mean, don't these guys, whip themselves and, believe in self-mutilation? And
well, you're speaking about the that other movie about Opus Dei. The Da Vinci Code. Not all true. I mean, certainly you have your zealots in any faith. I'm Roman Catholic. We're a lot different. I think we're different from Opus Dei. Opus Dei is an interpretation of the faith. Some of them do that. I think it's a very small minority. So, I don't want anyone to feel like Opus Dei is this crazy religion. It's not.
How many people were in on this investigation?
Well, in the beginning, there were very few. You keep the list small. That way, because you don't know who Hanssen knows and who's maybe working with him. Once we actually found his Palm Pilot and found out that yes, he is the spy for sure, and he's going to make a drop really soon. Hundreds were assigned to it, because now we go from investigation mode to arrest mode.
And you were also able to establish that he was working by himself, that he didn't have any other partners or anything like that in the FBI?
Right, none that we found, and which fit, because he was very much a loner, very much a solitary man.
Next up is Washington, D.C. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Okay, first let me say just thank you for C-SPAN. I think the country's a better place because of it, so thank you. Secondly, I saw the movie this weekend at the DuPont Circle Theater. The place was sold out, and I know that the show after mine was also sold out.
All right.
And also, just for the record, the movie was filmed, at least in part, at the building that I work at, which is Ariel Rios, down at 12th and Penn.
Exactly.
So I'm sure you remember that scene. I have two questions, actually. One of them is, throughout the movie, there are instances where you've used your Catholic faith and that commonality you have with Hanssen to get him to do certain things, like to stay with you when you're stuck in the traffic jam, and to get him to look the other way when you kneel down and pray in his office and you think he might catch you as he's walking in. Was that real? Did those things really happen? And then my other question is, I think I recall from the newspaper articles about this case that Hanssen had a relationship with a stripper and was actually supporting her financially and I guess, mentoring her as well. And I'm just wondering why that was not featured more than it was in the film, because I think that would have made it more interesting, actually.
Sure. To take your questions in order, in an undercover investigation, use every tool that is afforded to you. You pull into a mixed bag of experiences and knowledge and use everything you can. So I certainly, I guess in a way, used Hanssen's faith against him. I didn't feel bad about it because he had already betrayed every aspect of his faith. The stripper, this had already happened and was no longer an issue by the time the movie focused on the investigation. He certainly wasn't cavorting with the stripper during the 2 months that I was with him in that office. I think Billy Ray, who's the director, made a very wise decision not to bring down the level, the intellectual level of the movie by adding those quite bizarre elements. And it's certainly been portrayed in a different TV movie, and you can read about it in the different books that are out on Hanssen. But I don't think it was necessary to tell the story that we were telling.
What kind of agent was Hanssen?
He was a genius. He was intellectually very sharp. He was also a very solitary, as I said, confined man. He didn't talk. He he had something socially off. And he wasn't well liked by his colleagues at the FBI.
Why wasn't he as well liked as other agents?
Because he had a way of looking at you like he was smarter than you, and a way of talking down to people. And he certainly had no respect for authority. It's tough to like someone who you are certain thinks you're an idiot.
And these were things that inhibited his progress in the Bureau?
I certainly think so. He had some personality conflicts with subordinates. He had been written up a few times for some things he had said to women. He just didn't have the sort of respect to play the political game.
Eric ONeil is a former FBI operative and key figure in the Robert Hanssen case. His story is the inspiration for the film Breach. He currently is a National Defense and Homeland Security attorney here in Washington, D.C., and a graduate of the George Washington University Law School and Auburn University undergraduate. Our next call comes from San Diego, California, on our line for Republicans. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you. My main thrust of the question is concerning the mindset or rationale of people who are doing things that could not only destroy their own lives if it allows the Soviet Union at that time to have an advantage over us, but can destroy their whole way of life, their whole country. So could you get maybe into the rationale? Was otherwise a normal average American, and I was raised a Catholic during very conservative days when it was pointed out communists were killing Catholics all over the world, especially in Vietnam. And this Catholic is turning against his religion, his people, his own country. How do they rationalize this when they get up in the morning?
Well, you know, that's a difficult question to answer, and I don't even think Hanssen knows the answer to that. I mean, the man was certainly a study in dichotomy. On one side, he truly loved his family and was loved by his family. I believe that. He believed very strongly in his faith, and he was, at least if you talk to him, a rabid anti-communist. Now, at the same time, he was betraying his family, he was betraying his faith, and he had sold out to those communists that day after day he would pound the table against. So how do you understand that? I think he just compartmentalized things. He had this side of his life, he had this side of his life, and he was able somehow in his mind to keep them separate.
Charleston, West Virginia, on our line for Independence. Good morning.
Good morning. First, I want to say, as a former Catholic school kid who got thrown off the altar boys and patrol boys, I salute you, brother. You're the real deal. You're a fine policeman and a great American.
Well, thank you.
And I want to ask you, over the course of the investigation, from the initiation to culmination, how much time took place? What was your intellectual and emotional roller coaster that you went through? And also, did Hanssen ever make reference to, or do you have any reason to believe he was an Illuminati believer or sympathizer? You know that organization, I'm sure, and or if it even exists historically is debated.
Gotcha. The emotional roller coaster was certainly a rough one. I was in the investigation less than 2 months, but it felt like much longer for me, and during that time I thought I would be in for much longer, which was incredibly frustrating. It was tough to be in the room with Hanssen, and it's very tough to work undercover in an environment where you are continually lying and your lie builds. My target could never know that I was working him, and he was certainly trying to find out if that was the case. So I had to deflect his probes and at the same time work my side of the case. Was he an Illuminati? I don't think so. I'm not sure. He never talked about it.
Wichita, Kansas, on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Oh, I have two questions. One is, why did you leave the FBI before becoming an agent? And the second one is the movie itself. Isn't some of the parts of the movie for dramatic purposes and really didn't happen, or is it all true? Thank you.
Gotcha. The movie's not a documentary or a biography. It's a Hollywood movie, so there are dramatic elements. There are scenes that were added that didn't happen, and things are compressed. So when Ryan Phillippe, who plays me in the movie, he can do things in one day that took me 3 weeks. So that's one way to make a movie last an hour and 45 minutes instead of 6 hours. Why did I leave the FBI? A combination of reasons. I was 20-something at the time and made one of those 20-something decisions. I looked at what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and where I was with my wife and the family that she and I wanted to build, and decided to take my law degree at GW and eventually went through the emotional decision to leave the FBI and joined a law firm here in town.
Was it your intention when you joined the FBI to become an agent?
Yes, it certainly was. I think that when I joined the FBI, that was the goal. And going to law school at night while I worked this case and while I worked at the FBI, I was a night student at GW. Certainly the idea was to get that degree and go back to agents class, because you needed the higher degree still, even working in the system, to go back to the agents class.
How long after this case wrapped up did you make the decision to leave the FBI?
Within about half a year.
Next up is Phoenix, Arizona. Good morning. Phoenix.
Hi, I had a question for Mr. ONeil. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Were you ever in any contact with Robert Hanssen after the arrest, or did you have any desire to? And did you actually get to confront him after the arrest was shown in the movie?
I have not been in contact with him after the arrest. And in fact, the last time I spoke with him was the Friday before he was arrested. He was arrested on a Tuesday. The Friday was our last day in the office together. I'm sorry, he was arrested on a Sunday. The Friday was the last day in our office together, and the last words I spoke to him were, "I'll catch you later," and as he left the building, and that was the last time I saw him.
When you last saw him on that Friday, did you know that he was going to be arrested on Sunday?
I said Tuesday. I knew he was going to be arrested either Sunday or Tuesday. So if he was arrested Tuesday, then I would see him Monday and Tuesday, and I would have actually driven him to his arrest on Tuesday. But they made a decision to site as opposed to waiting and seeing if they could catch the Russian IOs.
Was there any time that you had established enough confidence or enough of a rapport with him that he tried to recruit you to be a spy?
Some of the analysts certainly thought that that was happening. The way that our conversations were going and the level of trust that he was starting to put in me and telling me old stories from his counterintelligence days and information that he probably should have known that he should have never told me. There was a suggestion that he was trying to recruit me, and that and there was a certain belief that he was going to leave this great legacy he had, this incredible ability to spy and that much fun he had with it, behind to someone new.
Deerfield Beach, Florida. Good morning.
Deerfield?
Yes, sir.
Hey, good morning. Just got a couple of questions for Mr. ONeil here.
Sure.
I guess you don't know very much about history, Mr. ONeil, because the guy that said something about the Jewishness of our spies. Let me remind you of some. Ever heard of Rosenberg?
Sure. I'm talking about contemporary spies.
How about contemporary? How about Mr. Reich a couple years ago? Don't you remember him? Let me tell you, 85% of the people caught for spying, almost all of them are. How about when the ADL sent agents into your law? Would that be considered traitors? What would that be? I mean, this is insane. Can't you? Are you too scared to say that spies have been Jewish? A lot of them are Catholics. I'm a Catholic. I know that. But you can't be so scared to tell the people the truth, man.
Let's move on to Marietta, Georgia.
I don't think there's any truthful answer to that question, or one that's not going to sound completely disingenuous and weird.
Marietta, Georgia, good morning.
Yes, I just wonder if you felt any danger when you're in this situation, and also did the politics of the time between the different departments stop you from communicating with those, like the CIA? That's it.
I get it. I certainly felt danger. Hanssen was a guy who walked around armed all the time. He was an incredible shot. This is a guy who never missed a target in his life, and he was also prone to anger and aggression. So I certainly felt a level of wariness and care in working with him. The sort of cross-communication between the FBI and CIA and other agencies certainly was a problem, and is one that I think that all agencies are working hard to fix. My role in the investigation did not require me to communicate with the CIA at all, but remember that I was just a piece of a much broader investigation, and I'm sure they were communicating.
St. Clair Shores, Michigan, good morning.
I'd like to know about his family or friends. Is he in contact with any of them?
I've heard that he can speak to his family and his wife, and he remain married, and she can visit him. Other than his immediate family, he's allowed no contact.
Now, you said that he never came to your apartment, as is portrayed in the film, but did you ever have any social interaction with his family or with his wife, his family?
Right, I did not. I did not. We were actually, my wife and I were supposed to go to dinner with his family the week he was arrested. And I think that the writers, Bill Rotko and Adam Mazer and Billy Ray, the director, decided that that scene had to happen, so they created it. But no, I never had that level of contact with his family.
And this is not giving anything away because it's already been reported in the Washington Post. Did he ever hold you at gunpoint as portrayed in the movie?
No, he didn't. He never shot a gun at me. There was certainly an overt threat. He had a way of putting his gun out on the desk and sort of spinning it toward me, but there was no actual firing at me.
Did you ever feel at any point in time when you were with him that your life was in danger?
Yeah, the one part that I seriously thought that he was going to walk out of his office and it was probably over for me was when a real scene in the movie, I did take his Palm Pilot, had forgotten what bag I pulled it out of, novice mistake, out of what pocket of his bag, and kneeling down in front of the bag, trying to remember what pocket to put it back into, heard him coming through the door. And instead of being able to think back and rationalize and get the right pocket and be sure, I just had to drop it in one of the four, zip up the bag, and run back to my desk. And sitting there at my desk, and he ran in the room, slammed his door, and I could hear him unzipping the four pockets. And I knew that he had run back just to check on that Palm Pilot that he foolishly left behind. And I thought, there's no way I got the right pocket. I'm just gonna get it as soon as he walks out.
Our next call for Eric ONeil, former FBI operative in the Robert Hanssen case, comes from St. Louis, Missouri, on our line for Independence. Good morning.
Good morning. I was wondering if Robert Hanssen has made any type of statement since his arrest.
He hasn't. He's not allowed to speak. It's part of his plea bargain is that he's not allowed to speak to media, to make statements, to write a book, to ever sell his rights to a movie, to do anything. And in return, his family got to keep his considerable pension. So, you know, the idea not to punish his family, but to punish the man.
How much cooperation did Robert Hanssen give after he was arrested?
I've heard for quite some time he was being very cooperative, and at some point he decided he was going to start forgetting everything. And that's part of the reason he's in Supermax isolation in prison right now.
Next up is San Antonio, Texas. Good morning. San Antonio.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for C-SPAN. Mr. ONeil, I saw Reach this weekend with my wife. We really liked the movie. I got two questions. One question is, from my recollection of the Robert Hanssen case, one of the big breaks that came was spies that are taking money are not supposed to display any kind of lavish lifestyle or anything. And I thought one of the big breaks was his wife was being totally redoing her house with like $36,000 worth of draperies, and one of the neighbors had turned her in because I think Robert Hanssen was probably GS-14, GS-15, something like that. I was wondering if you knew anything about that, because I thought that was one of the first big breaks in pointing this guy out. And the other part was if in the FBI you came up, if you were with the SSG, how they got you into his office as a clerk. Did they give you a background, you know, just kind of like make up some kind of background and hide your real identity? How'd they do that?
Okay, well, I'm glad you liked the movie. No, I had never heard that a neighbor turned them in. That sounds more like a Aldrich Ames, who was the CIA mole that was caught before Hanssen. That sounds more like a Rosario Ames thing. I know they spent lavish amounts of money. One of the reasons that Hanssen didn't get caught for so long is he took very little compared to what he probably could have taken for the secrets he was giving over. And he hid the money very well. They lived, at least on the face, very poorly. Secondly, what was the second question?
The second question was about your SSG assignment and the cover that you used.
I wasn't given a cover, and this was something that caused me a lot of consternation, but I was told to go in as myself because they were afraid that Hanssen's facility with computers would allow him to peel back any cover they gave me and ruin the case right there.
So the FBI sent you in as an investigator to work with this guy that they thought that, you know, might be able to, that was a spy.
Right. They sent me in as Eric ONeil, a former investigative specialist in the SSG, and it worked. He saw anyone who wasn't an agent. He was from the old school FBI. Anyone who wasn't an agent was a clerk, and therefore an idiot. So, you know, that's how I went in, working with them. SSG are another professional track in the FBI. We have badges and credentials just like agents. And so maybe he should have been a little bit more wary, but...
Next up is Saginaw, Michigan, on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Randolph Stillman. I have a question. Throughout the history that I've been following, like Robert Hanssen, Terry Anderson, the Walker family, did they ever find out why they did what they did? Was it for the money, or did they felt they were passed over promotions and they wanted to get back at their companies, or did they ever find out what happened?
Well, people spy for usually one or two reasons, for ideology or money. I think Hanssen, although if you read through Hanssen's letters, he certainly seems an ideologue. I think he sold out for the money, and then it became something that made him feel like James Bond. You know, but it's very specific to the spy. I can speak more confidently with Hanssen. I think it began for the money.
For the money, though, with Hanssen's knowledge, couldn't he have gone into the private sector and made money as a consultant or something like that?
He was. He was going to retire, which is one of the reasons they had to give him his dream job at headquarters to keep him in. And he had gotten a job offer from the private sector. He was going to make a lot more than he was at the FBI. You know, early on he sold out to make money, and then it just became a way of life for him.
Chicago, Illinois, good morning and welcome to the Washington Journal.
Good morning. Having sent 5 children through Catholic school, I can see why he needed the money. I also had read that his wife saw him make a drop, and the 2 of them went and spoke to a Catholic priest. The Catholic priest, as a penance, I read, told him he could be, absolved of this if he gave the money to somewhere. And at what point in the timeline was that, and how much could have been prevented had his wife or the priest come forth?
Right. This was early on. The way it goes, or what I've heard, is his wife Bonnie found $10,000 in cash and asked where it had come from, and he told her that he had given up some very limited and unimportant information. She told him he had to confess. He did. The priest told him that he had to turn himself in. And he was prepared to do so. And at the last minute, he was then contacted by the priest and told, well, you don't have to turn yourself in if you truly repent, promise never to do it again, and tithe all that money to a charity, not to their church, but to an actual charity, the $10,000, then you can be absolved of it. And he did, and I guess it was too hard for him to stop, and he went back and continued to spy.
Lansing, Michigan, go ahead.
Yes, I was curious. Recently, there was an FBI agent who lost her pension, I believe, and fired just within a few days of her being able to retire, over having contact with a reporter. And if I understand correctly, Mr. Hanssen was allowed to, even having spied for almost 25 years, made a deal where his family was able to have his pension.
Right.
How could that possibly be? That one agent who hasn't even been proven to having, all she did was talk to a reporter, and she loses her pension, and he's been spying for 25 years, and they make a deal where his family, even proven that his wife had some complicity early on, gets their pension.
Well, the easy difference is Hanssen is going to spend the entire rest of his life in prison, and right now he spends 23 hours a day in a small jail cell without any communication with any other human being, and gets an hour a day to walk around alone in a courtyard. His cellmates are people like Terry Nichols and the Unabomber, so it's more like being trapped in Arkham Asylum than anything else. You know, so he's going to have a miserable rest of his life. What you have to understand is that the most important thing in the Hanssen case was not to punish Hanssen. The important thing in the Hanssen case was to find out what he did. Whatever they needed to do to find that out, they had to do. And the 2 things they chose is to take the death penalty off the table and to allow his family to keep his pension. His house had, I think, a double mortgage on it. So this got him to talk. He pleads guilty. We don't have to go through a long, drawn-out trial, and we can immediately start finding out what he did to repair the things he broke in our government and protect people like you and I, and keep you know, foreign countries who want to hurt us from getting access to that information.
And for those of you not familiar with the Batman series, Arkham Asylum is where they put all the criminals that have been captured by the Cape Crusader. How much time did you actually spend on the set of the movie working with the directors and the stars of the movie?
Yeah, quite a lot of time. They, you know, Outlaw Entertainment and Universal and Billy Ray, the director, kept me incredibly involved in the entire process. Part of it was because it turned out I was an asset, but also because they are just really genuine, good people. I was there for prep before they even loaded film and a camera to speak with Ryan and to help Chris Cooper get into the role of Robert Hanssen, who he would never meet. I also was there during much of the shooting. A lot of it was in Toronto. They did 40 days in Toronto and 9 days here in D.C. I was certainly here for all the days in D.C. because it was very easy for me to get out there. And they flew myself and my wife Juliana out to see all the scenes between Ryan Phillippe, who plays me, and Caroline DeVerna, who plays Juliana.
Any thoughts of getting out of the law business and going into Hollywood?
Well, I do like my job as a lawyer. I also really have had a lot of fun with Hollywood. I think that Hollywood is more of a hobby for me right now, and I'm still playing around with other ideas.
Our last call for Eric ONeil comes from Colorado Springs. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Mr. ONeil, get to the chase here. It's my understanding that after Hanssen was apprehended, that Congress got involved in a list of people who were operatives from other countries. And their leak of this list caused many people to be eliminated or ostracized or that thing. Is there any truth in that? And if so, was there a number attached to Congress's loose handling of the security stuff?
I'm afraid I can't answer your question because I just don't know the answer to that, and I'm not trying to avoid the question. I just hadn't heard of that before.
Thank you very much, Eric ONeil, former FBI operative. Thank you very much for being on the Washington Journal.
And thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Right.
And that's it for this edition of the program. Later on at 12:30, we will have live coverage of the American Petroleum Institute's program on America's energy future with Red Cavaney, President and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. And later on in the morning, we'll also be covering the President's ceremonial swearing in for the new Director of National Intelligence. And we'll ask that you join us again tomorrow morning on the Washington Journal at 7 a.m. Eastern. Thank you.
On C-SPAN and online, Capitol News provides timely and relevant updates about Congress, politics, and public affairs. Look for Capitol News updates every 15 minutes at the bottom of your screen throughout the day. And find out more about the stories behind the headlines, along with video of the day's highlights, online at capitolnews.org. On C-SPAN and online, let Capitol News keep you up to date on what's happening in Washington, politics, and around the world. And here's part of what's ahead. First, a look at the future of the energy industry with the American Petroleum Institute's Red Cavaney. That's live at 12:30 Eastern. And tonight, White House Press Secretary Tony Snow questions reporters who spar with him during his daily briefings. From the National Press Club, it's live at 8 Eastern. A programming note, Mr. Snow will have his regular briefing today. That's at noon Eastern on C-SPAN 2. Middle and high school students, get your entries ready for C-SPAN's 2007 Student Cam National Video Competition. Pick a current political topic of interest to you, and using some C-SPAN video, produce a video documentary of 10 minutes or less. The grand prize winner will receive $3,000, and 45 prizes will be awarded overall, with the top entries airing on the C-SPAN networks. To learn more and for entry forms, go to studentcam.org. Entries must be received no later than March 30th. C-SPAN's 2007 Student Cam National Video Competition. What political issue matters to you? And now part of this morning's Washington Journal, a conversation on trade agreements under a Democratic Congress. It's about 45 minutes.
We are going to be talking about free trade agreements and the future of free trade agreements under the democratically controlled Congress. And Alan Tonelson of the U.S. Business Industry Council. First, tell me what you think the current, categorize the current situation with regard to free trade agreements in the United States, and then tell me what you think their future is under the democratically controlled Congress.
The U.S. has followed a fundamentally new trade policy really since NAFTA back in the early 1990s, something that we never tried before. Before that, U.S. trade policy was largely about opening foreign markets for U.S.-made goods, expanding exports, therefore expanding total demand for U.S. products, increasing job levels, and increasing wages. But with NAFTA, a new model of trade policy making took hold, and the main aim, as far as we can tell, has been outsourcing production and sending jobs overseas to low-wage, low-regulation locations like Mexico and China, not to service those markets, which were advertised as big, rapidly growing markets for U.S.-made products, but to service the U.S. market from these very low-wage, very low-regulation production sites. And the results have been stagnant manufacturing production for about 7 years now, more than 3 million manufacturing jobs lost, and whopping trade deficits that undercut America's